Good evening. It's a quiet group. I wanted people to think about, just to bring up again, the first night we met, we talked about some kind of disturbing, what was it? Difficult emotion that comes up for you. This is quite important because I know I maybe drifted back. You don't have to use the same one, but I really want you to feel that this has some practical application. So all of us struggle. And I remember at my first course in Nepal at Cayton, and they're teaching about or Rinpoche was teaching about the three, I don't know where it was, but three poisonous minds. We're talking about anger, attachment, and ignorance. And attachment I could get, and ignorance I could get. But I thought, I'm not angry. Does anyone else have that? Anger was like a hard one to, and then I realized, well, actually I had a lot of anger. But you start talking about irritation or being annoyed or something bugs you. Those are often indicators of anger. Okay, so anger, maybe even culturally, people aren't, we say you get angry when you go to a hotel and your room isn't ready or something, and then, or you get bumped from a flight, or, those things, then I was angry. I was really late for a job interview and there wasn't supposed to be traffic, there was an accident. I was angry, I was anxious. Well, people get angry, people get anxious. Those are usually what we mean by anger, but, and we talked about hostility, right, last week? We tried to go through those pretty quickly, I think. Hostility is that sense of irritation. So don't think you're not, well, if you're normal, I mean, not everyone's hostile, but everyone does have a hostility, I think. Some kind of hostility comes up throughout the day or through the day. Okay, so it's really getting in touch with so part of the problem of this class is why when the Buddha taught his very first teaching, the truth of suffering, which we talked about, again, I keep hammering it away, that the reason he taught it was because we don't think we suffer. Why else would he teach it? He didn't teach nirvana first. That would have been an easier way to do it and went away. The hard part is that so I think it's really important to think, okay, so he did teach that, and I talk about this because I think in our modern culture, this culture, we would not, in general, we feel we should feel fortunate, but we feel fortunate in a way that is probably incorrect, in the sense that, yes, we do have the essentials for the most part, right? We have relationships, we have clothing and shelter and food and resources. I mean, at least those of us in this room we do. So then we can talk. So then it becomes very tough in this modern culture, which has taken sort of this consumeristic approach for the last 100 years or so, to think about that we're in suffering. And so I really, really want you to, that's why I don't like using the word suffering. I don't know another word really. A lot of times I use discontent. But really we have to look at breaking down what it means suffering. And we've done that. We did that some the first night, right? It means being out of balance. And that being in balance is almost like should be like our birthright, our natural way of being. And people have a lot easier time than getting in touch with the fact that, well, maybe I'm not in balance all the time. Okay? And then people start talking about, well, I'm not in balance, when I'm not playing tennis very well. Right? Or I'm out of balance when my kids won't leave me alone when I just need to get some space. And then I get a little out of balance, right? That thing becomes like that. Then that's still not being in touch with what our quality really is. So the quality of a human being is having a human mind. So human mind is different than an animal mind. Okay? What's the difference between a human mind and an animal mind, do you think? Empathy. So, well, could be empathy, but then you see elephants that travel for hundreds of miles when they hear. Have you heard that?
Yes.
Yeah, to see when one of their herd has died or sick or something. So I don't know. They think that animals have some animals have empathy. So that maybe it's not empathy. What else? What it could be?
Analyze.
Huh?
Analyze.
Analyze. Yeah, could be something around analyzing. Certain way of thinking, right? So animals can't. Doesn't seem. I mean, some people say they can't plan, and then everyone says, "Well, the squirrel collects acorns for the winter, right?" So there's planning. Yeah, well, looks like planning, but you can't. I always tell this. I can't leave my dogs home alone for the weekend and say, "Feed yourselves the foods in the closet," right? Just go in when you need some. You can't say they don't know, right? They can't do that. And that's always talking about dogs or pets, and you go down the animal chain, to chipmunks. I always like chipmunks. They don't seem to have much control at all. But the human mind has also, I think, it has a quality to it, a potential to it, I would say. I would say animal minds have a potential too. Maybe all minds have the potential, but it's a potential that it seems they're unable to access, and I think humans can access it for the most part, have the potential to access it. So put in that light, if you think about our daily existence and our way of being, that's, I think, what Buddha meant by suffering. It's the same thing. I don't know if I mentioned, but it's like an analogy of, how many people have pets? How many of you would like to be your pet? You would? Think about it. I know people say, "Oh, I wish I was my cat," because cats always look so. I don't know. If you really would want to be, that's kind of. Did anyone ever see the scariest movie I ever saw? And I'm kind of, I guess, showing my age. Scariest movie I ever saw, and this is true. When I was growing up, I grew up outside Los Angeles, and there were many, many screenwriters and producers, Hollywood people amongst we weren't part of that, but in the neighborhood, my parents would they'd always have these barbecues on Sundays, and there's a couple in that group, they'd always bring home these latest films that were being produced in Hollywood, and I was only like, it's like early 60s or something. I remember they brought home Psycho, yeah, and they just showed it while the parents were and doing their thing, and the kids were all in this dark room watching. And they came in and got us little guy. I mean, I never saw the shower scene because they came and took me out. But that wasn't the scariest movie I ever saw. The scariest movie I ever saw, someone was connected with Disney, I guess, was, did anyone ever see The Shaggy Dog?
Yeah.
Did you think of it as scary? No? Anyone think of it as scary? Well, I was a little kid. I thought it was true. This guy started waking up in the morning and becoming his dog, and he had a little bit of hair on his face and a little bit on his hands, and the next morning a little more. And it freaked me out. I was too young. I thought it could really happen. And he'd look in the mirror, and all of a sudden, anyway. So, do you really want to wake up tomorrow morning? You want to be your pet? Did you say? Mm-hmm. Which pet? What do you have? Cat.
I have 3 dogs.
Which one do you want to be? Okay.
Spencer.
Okay, Spencer. So let's say you really want to, now think about it. Are you serious? I mean, if I gave you the choice, if someone gave you the choice.
It's unconditional love. If
No.
God can give that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
We're not talking about the love. We're talking about Spencer. And if you had a choice, like you had to make a decision, okay, you get one choice. You're going to be Spencer or not be Spencer. Would you choose to be Spencer?
Maybe
Not Spencer the person, but just like him.
Okay, maybe not. Yeah.
You want to wake up and start eating food with your face and be unable to communicate? And you get really hot, you can't tell anybody? You get sick, you can't tell anybody? And all you can do is run around. I mean, you think about if you really were in it, I think it's, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's because that movie I saw as a kid. I think of it as terrifying, actually. I do. I just think I don't think I used to, but you really think about eating raw meat. You got to eat raw food. And anyway, I digress, perhaps. Huh?
They have different tastes.
They have different tastes. Some people like sushi. Some people don't. Some people like raw
You know
food.
why they're so happy to see you when you come back?
Why?
Because
they've
they
been.
don't know if you'll come back.
They don't
They
know.
don't have that. We have future
Right.
planning. We
Right.
can see the future like we know that. That's why when things happen, it's such a shock.
So they're just in the moment.
They're in the
Live
moment.
in the moment.
Yeah.
It's like when Mother leaves.
That's what we're taught in meditation, right? We're taught to be in the moment. So what's the difference?
I don't really have any control.
No control. No control. So, I mean, actually, all the things that Spencer have that you want, you can do, right, in your life right now as a human.
Yeah, I'm beginning to use my animals kind of like.
I mean, that's, yeah, what is it that you think,
in a way?
what do you think that he has that you don't have?
What does he have?
That you think you don't have that you want?
Just being content with, you know.
He's content?
Yeah. Just being in the moment, being content, not looking at an advertisement.
Oh, I see.
You know?
Well, you can get rid of your TV. It's funny, isn't it? Yeah, he walks by the TV, doesn't even look at it, does he? Hmm. That's control of a certain sense. But that control is that of a different, it's not he's not in control. He's being controlled. So I don't know. Anyway, that's a different topic. We left off here. Why was I talking about that, though? Huh?
Physical emotions.
Oh, a human mind has the
Yeah,
potential of
animal
human mind.
Human mind.
Yeah. So your animal. Okay. So if you tell Spencer, it's really good if you just meditate a few moments every day. He can't do it. You can do it though. So he doesn't have that kind of potential. He just has to. He's just in reaction. You have the potential. You can do it. You can do it. Kind of anything, right? You can't, right? But you can't tell him to do anything. He won't know. His ignorance is so thick he can't even understand you. And even if he understands some language. How about a lizard? Well, it's going to be our pets, but pets are what percentage of the animal population? Pets are not even statistically measurable in the whole animal population. When you think about all the fish, all the birds, all the insects, and pets are just like the cream of the crop. Okay. So the point was potential of the mind. Are there any questions? Anything from last week? Oh, I wanted you to make sure you had some strong. That's what it was all about. It was in relationship to what we could be and what we are. Okay, and that we don't think. Maybe a lot of people say, when we talk. This the title of the class is working with difficult emotions. But we first understand why difficult emotions are difficult. Okay. And so if we want to develop more of a potential of the mind, which I think every person wants to be happy, then it's about the only way to really have that lasting kind of happiness is to subdue the things that upset that happiness, that balance, which are these disturbing emotions. Okay? And now, on the first day we talked about just the fact that they arise. And the second day, last week, we talked about what they are. And the schematic or the description I gave last week, it's just one description, remember that. But it's one that we can work from. Do you know, when you wrote down an event or something that gets you, were you able to identify which of these six it would have been? Just for the people who weren't here last week. Okay, a destructive emotion is sometimes referred to as a mental affliction. It's an inner mental event whose nature is to disturb or unsettle the mental state. Okay, it creates a restless or non-tranquil state of mind. It always creates some kind of problem and always brings bad results. If you look in the DSM-4 or 5, if you go to the statistical manual, if you look at any mental diagnosis in terms of the modern, Western, whatever you want to call it, description, they all do this thing. They all do this. Okay, even trichotillomania does this. Remember trichotillomania, right? Okay. Even a fugue disorder does this. Anyone know what a fugue disorder is? Fugue. F-U-G-U-E. I like it because the way it's spelled. Who knows what a fugue disorder? You know what a fugue disorder. You forgot.
I know.
You know it.
When you're confused and you don't, that's why I said, oh.
Yeah. What's a fugue? Yeah. Particularly, you forget who you are.
Yes.
Right. Amnesia. That's good. There's a lot of interesting ones. Anyway, those all disturb the mind. They're all mental. They disturb the tranquility of the mind. Okay. And it creates some kind of problem or bad results. Then we talked about attachment. If you don't have it, then you desire it. If you have it, you don't want to separate from it. Anybody, when they wrote down the thing that upsets them, was it related with attachment? Do you remember? Yeah? Okay. You know, if you think about loss, people, you know, it's like in therapy these days, it's a really big thing about grief, right? Grief counseling. It's interesting. Not that there isn't grief, of course there is. But I wonder how grief is done, how grief counseling is done. Is it done in a way that because really what is grief? I mean, to be brutal, it's attachment. Now remember, we're not talking that you shouldn't love that person. Let's say someone died close to you. It's not saying you shouldn't love the person. That's different than grief, isn't it? If you think about it. And part of the problem with this psychology, I'll tell you right now, is it's a bit brutal. It's very objective. It doesn't really care about cultural conventions in the sense, if they're cultural conventions that disturb the mind, then they're not worthwhile. If they're cultural conventions that help the mind, then they're worthwhile. That's all this psychology really cares about, is getting people healthy. So, you know, so the dwelling in loss is a disturbing emotion. It's attachment. Okay, to understand how attachment disturbs the mind, it's good to try and think about depression. Even though a lot of psychologists say depression is anger, for me, most of the time I look at depression, it seems some sort of sense of attachment because of a loss or not being able. If you don't have it, then you desire it. People often get depressed about that one. Okay, and even loss. When you think you lose a relationship, someone leaves you, they break up with you, it's out of your control. Okay, it's if you don't have it, then you desire it. Okay, it's not around anymore. Okay, what do all these things come from, by the way? Well, we'll get to that. So that's the attachment one. So remember, don't go to attachment first. Go to whether the mind is disturbed or not first. We have to get more in tune and more familiar with how the mind is doing. And remember, there was a quote by Lam Yeshe about checking your mind. You check do you remember? We had that quote. You check every. Is everyone? Okay. To become your own psychologist, when we talk about Buddhist psychology, we're talking about becoming your own psychologist. You don't have to learn some big philosophy. All you have to do is examine your own mind every day. You already examine material things every day. Every morning, for example, you check out the food in your kitchen. Okay? But you never investigate your own mind. Checking your mind is much more important. So no one is going to make you healthy. No one is going to do this for you. You got to do it yourself. Another reason why it's not attractive to all people. Some people really want to be saved, or the doctor will do it somehow, right? I mean, that's just our culture. It's just common. It's not a very easy idea to say that I have to do it myself. It's not very attractive. It's more attractive that a guru will do it, or God will do it, or the psychologist will do it. That's very common. Okay. So I'm going to go through these real quick for people who weren't here last week. So attachment, these are called the 6 main afflictions, or root ones. Hostility, which is like anger. A mind of ill will directed toward a source of suffering, wanting to harm or destroy the object. Someone who cuts you off on the freeway coming here. Oh, I saw. Yeah, I won't let it. Pride. That seems funny. I think pride is one of the root afflictions. A puffed up, conceited mind comes from comparing yourself with others and seeing yourself as having superior qualities. But we see this all the time. Why is this here? Because it disturbs the mind. It's one of the big disturbers. Ignorance, we're going to go into this more, is possessing a mistaken understanding of relative and ultimate reality. A mind that's not clear with respect to nature and qualities of things. I'm going to go into this a lot more. Doubt, an attitude wondering if relative truths are true or not. We don't even know what that means, relative truths. Wrong view, a mental factor whose functions distinguish the object before it and determine its qualities in a mistaken manner. Instead of leading to happiness, it leads to unhappiness. And there's 5 types of this, and again, we're going to go into this more, okay? I know this is all technical, but the thing is, really think about, the thing you wrote down or the thing you struggle with, and try and get a feeling for where it comes from. Most of them come from attachment. Most come from attachment. And then out of attachment, it becomes more intricate. In a way, we could say all of it comes from attachment. But the root of all, the main affliction is ignorance. So if you were to have a diagnosis, it would always come back to ignorance. Okay, but that's not so helpful because it's like, well, what does ignorance morph into? Okay, but if we want to cut, if we want to develop true mental health, eventually, we're not in the beginning necessarily, but eventually we've got to understand what ignorance means. And ignorance, the opposite is what? Well, besides wisdom. What does it mean, ignorance? What does ignorance mean? See, I don't have that slide up here. It's like a test. What does it mean? Does it mean not knowing how to speak Russian?
No, it means that we don't see things the way that they are, and we see things the way that they are not.
Thank you.
Not seeing reality.
Not seeing reality. It's weird. I think it's actually also exciting because if you start looking into Western modern psychology, you cannot get a uniform. Did you get a psychology? Did you get a definition of mind in your study as a mental health worker? Did you?
No, not really.
Pretty bizarre. Any other mental health workers here? Did you get a definition? Didn't you ever wonder why? I'm going to be a heart surgeon, but I'm not going to tell you what the heart is. Psychologist, a student of the mind, a studier of the mind, but we're not going to tell you what the mind is because we don't know. It might be this, id, ego, right? And then someone else, no, I don't know if it's that. Then you even look at the social constructivists, like people who work like in narrative therapy, which I have a strong affection for, but they have no psychology. They proudly say that we have no psychological theory, because it's all garbage. In a way, they're right. And so you ask them, it's really kind of cute, I guess. You ask them, so what about diagnosis? We don't do diagnosis because there's only one diagnosis. So just like Buddha, the one diagnosis is ignorance. In narrative therapy or constructivist theory, they say that one diagnosis is being stuck.
That's just always.
That's just always. Yeah. So, but they just to clarify, not to shortchange them, is that the reason they don't offer theory of mind is they are in reaction to all the theories out there. And they feel that most of the theories have been harmful to people and not helpful. And so, they really look at the balance of power, and they look a lot at the research done between therapists and clients, and the imbalance of power, and then which comes to the imbalance of knowledge. So that thing about if you go see a therapist, and then all of a sudden you thought you went in having a problem with, I don't know, depression, and you leave saying you have a problem with your mother, right? Or depending on the theory.
always the mother.
I know. Poor moms.
That's called transference.
It's called transference. Well, no, it can be then, or you have
For
a.
that. It's
But then it moved. People got sympathetic, and there was a problem with dysfunctional families, right? Moved off the mother. Then there was a problem with maybe alcoholic family. Then a problem with the social construction. I mean, it didn't move around. So I don't want to just slam it. And a lot of it's really very, very fascinating theory, and it's helpful. But as a psychology, it's different. It's not that helpful, in my opinion. But does it help people with problems? Yeah, definitely. Does it help people develop a lasting, healthy mind? I don't think so. I don't think it's that deep yet. It will be someday, I believe. But it just helps with temporary stuff. My opinion. Okay. So this week we're gonna talk about how these difficult emotions arise. So again, I want you to be in touch with something that's tangible for you. I don't want to, because this is not like a group therapy class. So I can't really ask you what your difficult emotion is, but is anyone what are some of the things that just happen in life that could fall into disturbing emotions? This is tangible. Like, what are problems that people face? What are difficult emotions?
Attachment.
Okay, give me an example though. That's a word, right? So what's a real live circumstance?
Attachment to children. Children leave and you.
Children leave.
Yeah, children
Empty nest syndrome. Right? They have a name for it. Yeah, children leave.
Yeah.
Also, children, before they leave, like that 14, 15, 16 stage. I won't ask how many people have kids, but you'll know. Isn't that hard? That can be hard too, because all of a sudden they don't need you anymore so much.
They are still your dependents. They are at home, so you still feel you're in charge.
Right, but they think they're in charge.
Yeah.
And so there's that letting go thing, right? Letting go, that's a good one. Letting go must have to do with attachment for the most part. That's the remedy, right? What's something else that would be a difficult emotion people would be dealing with? I like the one stress that someone brought up. Stress is pretty common. Would you call that a difficult emotion? I would. Anybody here deal with stress on a regular level? Yeah? You both said yes, so what's your condition, if I can ask? New job. Extremely stressful new job. Interesting. Yours?
Well, some job, some personal.
Yeah. So stress, that's interesting. Where does stress come from? I mean, we're generalizing, but it's good to think about it. Which of those 6? Pride? Don't want to look bad in your new job? Okay, could be. People are kind of not as... Anyway, a lot of things come up in jobs. Pretty pride, anyway. Why are they telling me what to do? They don't even know what they're doing, right? Could be pride. All kinds of things. So stress is an interesting one because that's a very modern problem. It's interesting. Why? So what's different now than, say, 100 years ago? Time?
And billable hours.
Available hours. Where does all that come from? That cultural construction. Technology, and where's technology come from? What mindset? If you think about it, it comes from a philosophy, right? Of happiness. Well, my one way to describe it. It comes from a philosophy of happiness that more you've got, more that you have, and this is kind of simplifying it, the more you have, the happier you are. Now, it doesn't mean more items necessarily. It could be more time. The more time you have, the happier you are. It could be resources in terms of money and a good job so you can live outside the city. But it's all based on one philosophy, which is what is the philosophy of happiness. Everybody has a philosophy, by the way. Every single living human being has a philosophy. They just don't always know it. When I say philosophy, it's about ask people, or maybe analyze what's driving people. What's driving them is their philosophy then. Okay, so stress is a good one. Why wasn't it around 100 years ago? It's because there's this cultural description as to what you need to be happy. And then we also feel that way.
Also living in the Bay Area is not like living in Oregon.
All right, so it's less stressful in Oregon?
Yeah, I mean, the stress around here is just,
So it's-
traffic, the public is much more.
Okay. You know, you're right and you're wrong, right? Because you don't have to agree with me. Well, this is what we're going to get into. So you have these external, you have this data. More traffic around here than Medford, Oregon. That's data, right? That's true. So, but stress, and let's go into this more in a few minutes, okay? Stress is a mental event, isn't it? The mental event is in you. And the in you is the same in you as in Medford, Oregon. Those Medford Oregon, how do you say, what are Oregon people? Oregonians. Those Medfordians. Right? They're just mental beings like us. But we say the stress is this area. That's very common to say that, right? But the stress is mental. It's not external. There's nothing out there that's stress, and you catch it. Of course, it can, if everyone's stressed around you, that does seem to impact, it brings it up for you. And I would say you, I don't mean you personally, us, right? Is there anything here, can you find stress in this culture? Can you find it?
Hostility, or
It's a hostility is in a person,
if somebody's directing hostility at you.
right? What happens then?
Still, you have to make a decision.
All right. So they're hostile towards you. Before they're hostile to you, where's the stress? Not there, right? Then the hostility, right? Now stress. Where's the stress? Did they sort of throw it into your car?
It's a reaction.
Yeah. Isn't it? It's a mental. So there's nothing in that person. I don't think he or she. Now we could go and look at mirror neurons and neuroplasticity, and they're studying a lot about. If you don't know, it's really interesting stuff about mirror neurons and how you do pick up on people. You actually. Your neurons do affect other people, and people's neurons affect you if you're in close proximity. But it's still coming. It's still the way that you process it and the way you deal with it. So it's possible. Let's say there's a lot of hostility. You're driving, a lot of hostility and aggressiveness. Let's say aggressiveness, right? By the way, hostility, that's aggressiveness, right? So you think you don't have anger? I'm not saying anyone in here is. But you know how I was at that course? I said, I'm not angry, but you see me driving around L.A.? Yeah, I would say I'm not aggressive. I'm just being a good driver. Going in and out and out. Anyway, so that aggressive, that's hostility. If you check into your mind when you're driving like that, you call it stressful or whatever, in a hurry, your mind is disturbed, isn't it? And you can judge its disturbance based upon what happens when you hit a roadblock. The adrenaline's going. You get your head feels tight. That's hostility, by the way. Okay, that is not a healthy state of mind. But we don't know it's not because everyone just does that. right? Until you start thinking about, not you people, but me included, until we start thinking about our potential. Okay? Then that person who's runs into traffic and starts getting aggressive and hostile, right? Is that person in control? No. What's in control? The afflictions in control. So it's beginning to make that switch between, all that we're talking about is control. Being in control versus not being in control. We are not in control. And you can experiment with that if you don't know what that means. Just see how much you are in reaction. 24 hours a day in reaction. It's pathetic. In that way, we're not different than Spencer, by the way. And generally, we're not that different from Spencer. We are generally most closely aligned with animal mentality. Why do I say that? Because we don't access our potential, and we don't. You have to investigate yourself. How often are you just in reaction? I'm going to reach for this tea. I'm going to take a sip of the tea. Is that in reaction, or am I in control? My world, I'm in reaction. I'm not in control. I get some sensation in my mouth, my throat's getting a little dry, right? And I reach for a sip. No, that's not control. If I was in control, I could take a sip or not take a sip. And not be disturbed, right? Okay, my mind would stay the same. But in my case, the longer I don't take a sip, my mind's getting agitated. It's getting a little bit agitated, isn't it? Probably. Okay? So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about these levels. So when are you not in reaction? So everyone, you put your hand up like that. Do you think that's in reaction, or were you in control? Okay? I'm going to assume it was in reaction, but I don't know. I'm not in your mind, so I can't say.
That's his listening mode.
And he did it for me. He wanted me to know you were, oh, thank you. That would be in control. But really analyze for the moment. Now, what does that mean if we're not in control? That is the definition of suffering from what Buddha taught. That's it right there. That absence. And now, why do we have no control? Why?
The absence of control.
Yeah, the absence of control. Why? Because our mind is not trained. And remember I said there's only one, we go down to one diagnosis. And that diagnosis is ignorance. What you said earlier. Isn't that weird? So what it means is we don't see things correctly. Okay? This is really, really, really important, and it is in tonight's presentation. I'm just doing it now. Part of it now. Without the slide up there. What this is, well, that's partly related. What it means, remember we talked last week, or the week before, that we don't see reality? We talked about that, right? Okay, now you begin to understand. That is the root of all mental disease. It's weird. So it's not, the root is, whatever. When I said we're not balanced, it's true we're not balanced. But we have to know why we're not balanced. So in this philosophy, in this psychology actually, it's because we don't see reality. And what that means is we don't see things as they really are. Things are there. Okay? So 150%, as my wife likes to say, I always say there's no 150%. There's only 100%. Everything else is then the next, anyway. But it's a nice way to say things. 150%, the stress is not in the traffic. Okay? If it were in the traffic in this area, right? Everyone, once they get in that traffic, would feel stress. But not everyone does. James driving around. What's your favorite music? I'll take you for a power pop. So he's listening to who? Like Jason Mraz or Okay.
YouTube.
Okay. Right. Okay. He's listening to you too. He's not stressed. He should be. He's in the same traffic as you and me. If the traffic were the stress, he'd be in it too, right? But that's okay. So when I say we don't see reality, what we see when we're in the traffic is exactly what you said. This is so stressful, right? That's what we say. This is screwed up. We see a lot of things. And we see it in the situation. And it's not there. Where can you find it? We don't think like that normally. We are in reaction. We are in reaction. We see, we react. And what we see is not even there. And we react. It gets more subtle, by the way. Okay? When you look at the traffic, or when your kids come home late, right? That's what I was saying earlier. It's just data. All it is, and it's not even that, but this level we'll say, all it is moving molecules. Is there anything that's not just some movement of atoms and quarks and protons? And is there anything else there? So your kids come in, or your boss, the guy that irritates you. Okay? He's out to get you. Performance review, right? So there he is, and you get an image of him, and you just automatically get kind of tense. And you're going to get, right? Squeeze, your mind gets tight. So what is there, first of all? Let's say he's not even in the room. You think about, you got to go to work this morning. And you think, oh God, that guy, right? And he's not even there, right? But you will be convinced that, and then if someone says, well, why are you getting so upset? Well, you would get upset too if he was your boss, right? And you're not even there. What is it you're in relationship with at that point?
It's an image that you have.
An image, merely a concept. But when we're in that level of stress, you don't, excuse me if I project onto you, I'm imagining you do not see it merely as a concept. You're just like, oh shit, I gotta go there, right? I gotta go deal with that guy. Oh, I don't, right? It's real. Wouldn't you say it's real? And you know what you're dealing with. Everyone said, hey, you're just hallucinating. You say, oh no, if you met him, you would, but you are just hallucinating, right? In reality, you're just hallucinating. He's not there. It's just a concept that you think is real. It's a mere thought that you can't even find. And that thought is moving moment to moment as well. Uh-oh. Where is it? We talked about that last time. Okay, so I'm going to go on. We'll get into this more. So does that begin to give you a little idea when we talk about we don't see reality? Okay? We see something else. But it's not the reality. Remember the definition of reality? Uh-oh. Yeah, it was really easy. I gave it twice. What's the definition? Huh? Not seen clearly. What is? Well, if you see clearly, you'd see reality, but that's not the definition of reality.
The way something appears is the way it exists.
Thank you. You got a good note taker. The way that something appears is the way it actually exists. The way your boss is appearing isn't the way he exists, because he's appearing. It's just he appears as real, solid, but it's just a concept. There's nothing solid there at all. Very simple definition.
Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, the way that something appears is the way that it actually exists, or the way that it exists, it appears in that way.
So that's the definition of reality.
Yes. Yeah.
But we're seeing it wrong. Is that
Exactly.
okay?
Let's say a gross example. David Copperfield manifests a train car. You've seen that? Like, okay. Well, that's not very good. That's not an exact number. Well, okay. And then he makes it disappear. That train car doesn't exist the way it appeared to you or me. It's probably a reflection. You're probably using a mirror. So it's actually a mirror image of a train car. Maybe it's not a good example, but something in magic or hallucinating. Hallucination is not exactly the same thing, because in hallucination there's nothing. So let's say we hallucinate a pink elephant, right? That's not exactly the same, because that pink elephant is nothing of a pink elephant that exists. But if I were to throw up some pink smoke, right, and say, oh, it's a pink elephant, everyone sees a pink elephant, okay, that may be a better example. It's really just smoke, but we see it as an elephant. That's what we do. That pillar, you, me, everything you see and I see right now, we don't see how it is really existing. It's not appearing to us the way it exists. It's appearing to us in a way that does not exist. And we'll talk about that. It's really important to talk about. Okay? Did I say it doesn't exist? No. I didn't say you don't exist, I don't exist. I'm just saying you don't exist the way you're appearing to me.
Does that have anything to do with the way we see things?
Also seeing things, yes.
I mean, how,
Visually.
Things are switched, with physically, and does that have
well, it's a little bit related. I mean, it's another affirmation, maybe, it's another way of saying it. But we are talking about a mental twist. And what you're talking, the way the eyes turn things around and upside down and all that, that's a physical twist. But at some point it's happening mentally, right? Yeah.
So would animals see things closer to what they actually?
No, I don't think so. Not from what I understand. All of us are in the same boat in that one. Yeah. They're not necessarily more wrong than us. We're not more right. We would say that theirs is because they lack that analytical quality, that's a thicker ignorance than ours, but probably not the way they. The way they see things is probably a little thicker in ignorance. I can explain why. That's an interesting point. If I get a chance, remind me. Because there are qualities, like, for example, we can see things closer to reality and still not see reality. That's a much better way of being than, say, being a cricket. Cricket's way of seeing things is going to be a lot more thick and obscure, let's say, than that person's, even than ours. But not much for most people. It's not a big difference. But once you start analyzing it and trying to see things for that, that's a big difference. Then. That's a huge difference. Even if we still don't see it, just suspecting is huge. It's amazing even to have this conversation. It's not very common, is it?
No.
On the planet of how many people? Billion? 7 billion? I mean, there's some that will have this, but I mean, it's statistically almost immeasurable. You think about all the people that don't think about this and can't have this kind of conversation. That's most people. So, anyway, and then anything else?
So last time we had confusion about the definition of reality. So it's the way something appears is the way it exists. Is not the way it exists.
No, it is correct.
It is the way it exists.
Yes. Reality is that something appears the way it exists.
But we do not see things usually.
We don't see things as they are. So this cup exists. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist.
I know
Yeah, well, it takes a long time.
Yeah.
But this cup, I'm not saying does not exist. I'm not double negative. I'm not saying it does not exist. I am saying it doesn't exist the way it appears to you. Okay? That's different. Okay? So we don't see what is there, and we see what isn't there. Okay, I'll talk about more. What we see. I mean, the obvious next question is, well, what do I see then that isn't there? Right? Remember when we talk about seeing the cup? It applies to all 5 senses as well. And even in your dreams, your mental sense. So it's not just, we don't hear things the way they appear. No, is that right? Yeah. We don't hear things the way they exist. We don't smell things the way they exist. Doesn't mean there's nothing to smell, but we don't smell them the way they exist. We don't taste things the way they exist, and we don't feel things the way they exist. So 5 senses. Okay, and then when you image your dreams, you don't see them the way they exist either. You see something there. There's some taste, of course. How do I see it is wrong. And of course, next question is, okay, come on, tell me, how do I see it? You got to wait a little bit, okay?
How much?
Next week, maybe? No, we'll talk about it. This is not, I mean, believe me, this is very, very not easy stuff. But very, very essential. It's 100%, 150% essential. You can't not study this stuff or think about it. You can't. Okay, but you can do it at slowly, different levels, of course. Doesn't mean this is all you have to think about. Okay, just this is the way it puts everything in context. It's kind of like, okay, we'll go on. So this is a teaching from it's not often taught, but Lam Yeshe taught this in my very first course. I met him in 1975. I didn't remember he taught it then. I remember him teaching it and being struck by this teaching, but I couldn't remember when until someone reminded me recently. It was in that very first course. So I want you to think about that thing, that affliction that arises for you, okay, that disturbing emotion. Please make this tangible. That one or someone, something that you struggle, the stress thing or whatever, okay? But it really has to make this tangible in terms of what is that disturbing emotion you'd like to get a better handle on, for example, okay? There's other ones, but I don't mean I'm not holding you to those 6 definitions. I'm talking about, it might be laziness. Laziness is a mental affliction. Okay? It might be shame. There's good shame and bad shame. I'm talking about the bad shame. Embarrassment. There's good embarrassment, there's bad embarrassment. Okay? Low self-worth. Self-criticism. Criticizing others. Criticizing others, where does that come from?
Your own self.
Which of those 6?
Yeah.
Remember those 6 root afflictions? Huh? I think pride. And by the way, there's 6 kinds of pride, and one of them is feeling the worst and lowest of everybody. That can be a kind of pride. Yeah. You can see how it could be. Okay. So these 6 factors, so those disturbing emotions to arise. Take one that's familiar to you. Like procrastination. That's another good one. What's procrastination related to?
Laziness?
It's kind of laziness.
Doubt?
Doubt, maybe. Okay? So you got one? The first factor is the basis. You have an imprint. When I say you, I'm always implying me too, okay? So if I don't say we, when I say you, I mean we. Okay? It's just a language thing. An imprint or predisposition exists. Okay. Let's say your thing is getting stressed in traffic. You have a stress imprint on your consciousness. Remember I said it doesn't exist in the traffic, so it has to exist somewhere in you. Where in you? It's in your mind. Okay, consciousness is a synonym for mind. You can't experience stress in traffic. If you bring a Tibetan fresh out of Nepal or India or Tibet, and you just picked him up at the airport, you get stuck in traffic, right, in Santa Clara, do you think he's stressing out? I don't think so. He doesn't have that imprint. I'm generalizing, but he could have the imprint, right? But just generalizing. He hasn't spent his time traveling in traffic, in India he has, but, you know what I'm trying to say? If you don't have that imprint, so imprint means this is the fundamental cause. This is what we need to shift really in our thinking. The traffic is not the cause of your stress. Okay? The boss is not the cause of your stress. or your anxiety. We always want to say it's the boss. We always want to say it's the traffic. We always want to say it's the bad service in the restaurant. You know, the other night I was away for a few days, and not very far. I was in Danville. But since I live in Santa Cruz, I decided to stay up there. Danville, and then next day I had to be in Livermore. So then I had to be in Livermore for some event at 8 in the morning, which is early for me because I'm not an early bird. And then someone said, you know, when you're driving from Danville to Livermore at 8 to get there at 8, it might take you 45, 50 minutes, even if it's only 15, 20 minutes away, because of the commute. That stress in the commute, right? So what did I do? I got really, really clever, and I found a hotel in Livermore, and I went that the evening before. Why worry about it, right? Exactly. They put me in this room. You know, God bless them. It was a handicap room, right? So the shower was sunken down, and I was going into the bathroom stall, and I bumped into the thing that you use if you're in a wheelchair. By the way, I think I'm sympathetic. My sister-in-law's paraplegic, so it gives me permission to joke about it. But I ran into the thing, that you sit on over the toilet, and then I had to get up, and what do you know? Wouldn't you know, they give me the room right under the dumpster. And it was still dark. It must have been 5 in the morning, and that trash truck was trying to get that dumpster to low, and he was putting it back. It must have been out there 15, 20 minutes. Of course, it sounds like an airplane because there's no noise at that time. I got the worst night's sleep, and it was all that dumpster and that hotel's fault, right?
Of course it was.
Thank you. See, my mind immediately went to there. Okay? That's kind of how we do it all the time. But the fundamental cause was what? The imprint on my mind, on my consciousness. If I had no imprint, I would not have gotten any. I probably wouldn't have even woken up. A lot of people would have slept through it. Okay? But we will go, the cause is the dumpster. Okay? Now, every single instant, actually, depending on the text that you want to go by, there are 60 mental events that's an instant. Okay? There's 60 mental events in every instant. Another text says 280 in every instant. But actually there's sort of an infinite. I mean, you can't, because it's something that's fluid. It's not something that sounds like beginning. Anyway, point is, let's just say 280. So right now we've just experienced probably several thousand, right, in just a few instances, right? Every one of those leaves an imprint on your consciousness. Okay? So we have that imprint on our consciousness. That's a lot. You go through life, everything is recorded. So our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body, did I forget one? Are constantly recording. They're like lenses recording, video lenses. Okay? They don't miss much. There's some that's missed. Okay? But it's never not recording. That's the problem. Never. Even when you're sleeping, it's still recording. And while it's recording, it's also projecting. That's why we don't see things as they are. Part of why. Because I'm projecting, my mental imprints are even projecting the color and the shape and reactions also that I have. Okay? I think that the stress is in the traffic. I've just projected onto that traffic. That's why my Tibetan friend didn't do it. Because he didn't have the imprint, he couldn't project onto it. So if you get really stressed out, if you really have a problem with your boss, all those things, if there's no imprint, it's not going to rise. Okay? When it's bad stuff, like disturbing things in your mind, so there's 3 kinds of imprints, right? There's helpful ones, there's harmful ones, and there's neutral ones. Because for me, in a way, let's just take this as a metaphor maybe. For me to have this nice cup of tea, and it makes my mind a little bit calmer, right? It satisfies for a moment. That's due to an imprint that was helpful in my consciousness. I created that imprint. I could take a sip of this and get really disturbed, right? Oh, it's too sweet, or it's not sweet enough, right? People do that all the time, right? Okay. Whether I experience that as pleasant or disturbing is based on my imprint. But what do we say? Oh, she didn't make it sweet enough. She doesn't know how to make a cup of tea. Where'd you learn how to make a cup of tea? Did you really? Right? Isn't that normal for us?
Yes.
Not for you? James?
I was just
Overwhelmed by
overwhelmed by all the memories.
all the what?
All the memories.
I know.
Things that occurred.
It's pretty intense.
Yes.
For example, when I took a sip, okay, and I experienced some pleasure, that's based on an imprint. But what else did I do? See, I said I'm also videotaping at the same time. I put a new imprint on my consciousness. Oh, that tea is good. What happens the next time I have a tea that's not like that one? Mine might get a little disturbed. Then I put a new imprint on. Not only that, but I reinforce that tea was good. That kind of tea is good. You following this? So remember, you've got to take this to your particular situation and apply it. Okay? We're going to get it. Okay. So, and you create imprints through your body, your speech, and your mind. But all the imprints are mental, by the way. Because we don't do anything with our body that isn't connected with a mental activity. That's why we do something like killing, we think is a non-virtuous. Non-virtuous just means it's an imprint that is going to disturb the mind. Harmful imprint. If you want to know what bad and good is, it's simple. It's not that complex. Bad are imprints that disturb your or other people's minds, and good are imprints. Good actions are those things that leave imprints that are helpful to your mind and the minds of others. It's so simple. So if you want to start working with morality and, right and wrong, start from that point of view. But one thing is, what is helpful to someone's mind and your mind changes over time, doesn't it? When I became a therapist, I thought what was helpful for their minds was me being, giving them mental massages. And now I don't think that's the most helpful thing. Not that's bad. You just keep doing better, Now I think of it something different. So, so that's the way you think of bad and good. What's going to be the result? Is it more peaceful, balance, wisdom, clarity, or is it something that brings more confusion? You can even look at those 6 root afflictions. Is it something that's going to bring more hostility later? It's like you join a political movement, a social movement, and it can look really good. And what happens is we'll get to that. Your mind gets more disturbed. I think you need a break. Oh, it's going to end a little earlier tonight. Do you want a break? But I was going to try and end a little bit earlier than we have been going. Should we just keep going and then end early? Is that okay? Okay. If you need to just please feel free to get up and get some great tea. Okay, so that's the basis, an imprint. You cannot forget that. I have a couple more points about that. Okay, so the 3 kinds of imprints, right? You were looking like, who are those guys? The 3 Stooges, right? It has nothing to do with the 3 kind of imprints. It's only to hold your attention. And I already told you what the 3 kinds were, okay? So now, last thing, this is not, so you see up there, mental energy. So imprints are imprints, now you know, for those who didn't know, I was just giving a teaching on karma. I don't call it karma unless I have to. I mean, it's a Buddhist class, so. But karma is confusing. So think of karma. Karma actually means action. Action. That's, I mean, translated as action. And I think, I might be wrong about this, but I think it's primarily means mental action. When your mind is moving, that's action. That's karma. Is that interesting? There's no instant karma, by the way. No such thing. Well, I guess there could be. I shouldn't say there's no such thing. But generally what people mean when they say, oh, see? That's because you took that pen from that guy this morning and you didn't give it back? That's why your car got hit? Or something. It doesn't happen that way. It takes a lot longer for the most part. Not all, though. Why? So all these imprints. So now again, please be in touch with that disturbing emotion that you're familiar with, that you're working on, right? So that disturbing emotion or that difficult emotion is mental energy, isn't it? You can see it. So I get stressed out or I get more and more anxious. When you get hungry, people get agitated. That was very common. Grumpy. Irritated. Irritated is mental energy, isn't it? Being irritated. Isn't that a mental event? Okay. So that leaves an imprint. That means karma. And you getting agitated in traffic has to do with past imprints. It's true. Okay? The imprints are rising or ripening. And also you're leaving new ones. So next time you're in traffic, guess what happens? Same thing. Okay? So all imprints have 4 qualities. Certainty means, so if we're doing if every 280 times in an instant you're having a mental event, you're leaving 280 imprints at least. The certainty is that certainty means those are imprints. They are seed, and then you can use the word seed, like a seed or a potential. Okay? They will ripen. The meaning is they will ripen unless you do something about them. They're there. They ain't going away. Yes?
So if you're reacting to the news, are you planting what you think you're seeing as a seed in your mind stream, and that could happen to you?
I don't know if that could happen to you. That's a good question.
But I mean, like, if you're taking
It's not the same.
enjoyment over someone's suffering.
Okay, let's say. Okay, well, that's a good question. So, okay, it's not up there. It's one of the 4. It gets very complex. So the teaching on the ideas on karma is very, very, very complex. There's many, many details which I'm not going to go into. But the result. So if you have a result, you have a cause, right? The result has to be. Let's put it differently. The cause has to be similar to the result. So in other words, you can't plant a sunflower seed and get a pine tree. If you're watching the news and you're watching people getting killed, you're not killing. Okay? So the cause to get killed, for example, and I know intellectually, I'm not saying intuitively, the cause to get killed is from harming others, usually killing others. If you're watching killing on TV, you're not killing others. Okay? Same with video games. Okay? I didn't say it was not something else negative, but it's not killing. There's many things needed. Okay? Magnification just means that imprints can increase. Okay? So let's say you're watching the news. It's not one imprint, but one imprint is you get really pissed off with the Palestinians for doing that. I don't know. I made that up. I don't have a point of view on that. You see what's happening in Israel, Palestine. You get angry with the Israelis. You get angry with the Palestinians. It doesn't matter. And then what do? Then all of a sudden you're driving by a protest. And you start yelling at the Palestinians. Blah, blah, you get angry at them. That's a magnification, one small imprint of you when you're watching the news. And then maybe you get out a gun and you shoot them. Or you keep what it's called, fantasizing, creating. That's from one seed. So they can get magnified. That's what that means, magnification. Okay, so you got to be a bit careful. This one is I think the most important for our group right here. One will never experience the result not created by oneself. If you didn't create it, you don't experience it. It is not the traffic's fault that you feel stressed. If you didn't create the imprint, you can't experience it. If you didn't create the imprint even to be robbed and get disturbed by you being, robbed, you can't be robbed. I just read an amazing story. I know this is kind of a bit of an exception, but the amazing story of this 14-year-old girl. You know that story. She was Colombian, I think. Ecuadorian, Colombian. And the plane got hit by lightning. Right? She was 2 miles. The plane was 2 miles. And she lived. She's the only one that lived. She didn't have the imprint to die. She couldn't die. If you don't have the imprint, it can't happen. She fell 2 miles. She was in her seat, and it crashed through the trees, they think. So is the reason she didn't die because she went through the trees and the trees softened her landing? Is that the cause? That's what we think, right?
That's a condition.
That's the condition. The cause is different. Okay? Okay, we're not going to go there right now, but this is what we're talking about. When you talk about karma, it's mental imprint. There's no mental imprint for her to have the cessation of her consciousness in that body. Didn't happen yet. It wasn't there. It's there some point, someday, but not then. Everyone else on the plane had created those imprints. Maybe they did it together. Who knows? And the last one is the imprints are never, ever, ever lost. So you know how you kind of like sneak and do sneaky things, and no one sees you. Those imprints are still there. Okay. Now, this is number 2 of the 6 conditions. You need an object. That's wrong when I say if no imprint, there's no disturbing emotion. It should say if no object, then no disturbing emotion. Oh, I guess I did say that. If no imprint, then no disturbing emotion. Likewise, no object, then no disturbing emotion. Let me explain something really quickly. To have a perception. Okay, so go back to your what's it called? Your destructive emotion. What do we call it? Destructive? Difficult. Go back to your difficult emotion that you're working with. If you don't come in contact with the object, the emotion doesn't arise. Why is this important? If you're an alcoholic and your disturbing emotion is around your alcoholism or substance abuse or smoking, what is one way of dealing with that? Don't go in a bar. Don't buy cigarettes. Okay? There are many, many, many interventions that work on just the object, and that's okay. Okay? Because we're talking about how these disturbing emotions arise. One is the imprint. If you don't have the imprint, or if you do have the imprint, then good chance that it may arise. But you can have the imprint and never get in contact with the object, and it won't arise. Doesn't mean it's gone, right? That's one thing very important. Remember I said imprints you never lose them, and you can get rid of them, but on their own they're never lost. Okay, so let's say I've created the imprints to be, dependent on drug or cigarettes, let's say. Okay, and then I just don't come in contact with the objects. I don't smoke, right? But have I gotten rid of the imprints as a smoker? Probably not if I was a smoker. Okay? that make sense? You can, of course, you can get rid of the imprints. That's the whole idea. I'm just saying in general. That's why we talk about dry drunks, right? People know that term. Anyone know that term?
I've heard of that term.
Yeah, that's what it means, because people go into a 12-step recovery and they don't really work the steps, they say. Often they just become dry drunks, meaning they don't drink, but they have the same behavior, mindset, mentality. Maybe they change their object to, I don't know, gambling or golf or sex or something like that. That's what the dry drunk thing is. Now, what I wanted to say to you, so in every perception, you need three things. This is very simple. You need an object. So let's take the cigarette. You need a cigarette. Okay. And you need a sense organ. Remember, there's only 5 senses. Okay. Well, 6 counting the mental sense, but 5 for now. 5. Okay. So when you think about cigarette, which sense is that? It's probably not the smell. You think it's smelling? No, it's not smelling. I don't think so. It's not the hearing, and it's not the sight.
Taste.
Is it taste? How many people smoke? Anyone here ever smoke? Yeah, I did before. Only us 2? You, so thank you. God, looking pretty bad up here. So I would say it's tactile. Oh yeah. Yeah, it wasn't really the taste for me.
Stuffing the thing in your fingers.
Yeah, and also that experience in the chest, lungs, and then it spreads through the body and like that. Tactile for me. I think it's tactile. So you need a cigarette. You need a sense organ. What else? What's the third thing you think you need? To have an experience. I've already told you what the third one is.
Imprint.
Yeah. Where's the imprint made? Yes, in your consciousness. So you need a consciousness, you need a sense organ, and you need an object. If one of those 3 is missing, you don't have an experience. Weird, huh? So if you don't come into contact with the object, you don't have the experience. If you don't have the sense organ, you don't have the experience either. Right? No imprint. And if you don't have the consciousness, you don't have an imprint. So that pillar, I don't know. I don't want to use that. It doesn't have a consciousness, so it doesn't also have a sense organ either. It's not a good example. But if you need all 3, if all 3 are there, there's no experience. If all 3 are not there, there is no experience. So think again about this thing you're working on. You can work on it by not getting in contact with the object.
You
Okay?
can just avoid your boss.
Avoid the boss. Close your eyes. Close your ears. Yeah,
Got
unfortunately.
my answer.
Yeah, okay.
Just avoid it.
Avoid.
Stay home.
When you have the 3, superstition explodes. What it means, think about that. The way that I asked my brother, he smoked for a little while, and this is a long time ago, and I asked him, but how did you quit? He said, well, I went home and I made a list of all the good things that smoking does for me. And he says, there's nothing on the list. I thought that was really a very intellectual way of doing it. But if you think of it the other way, if you're a smoker and you just put a cigarette there, you should see. I mean, you watch people smoke. That's what about the superstition explodes, or chocolate cake. If chocolate's your thing, you decide I'm not going to have any chocolate in the house. I'm not going to have any in the house, and then someone brings you some chocolate for your birthday, right, or whatever. Take it away from James. Yeah, but when you put it there, how long can it sit there on your fridge before you go to it? Microseconds.
It doesn't last a night.
It doesn't last a night. Yeah, that's what it talks about, because your in this case it's your mental consciousness, right? Mental sense first is thinking about it.
Yeah.
And sees the
Obsessing over
evidence.
it even.
That's what it means by superstition exposed. That you can't even, you lose so much control that in microseconds you're in the fridge, it doesn't even last a night, you eat the chocolate. That's what I meant by superstition explodes. Yeah.
So, I have a couple questions.
Sure. These are just 2 of the 6 that cause these disturbing emotions to arise. Yeah.
The sense organ is not, you're not talking about the mind, it's the other 5, but then the mind will...
Okay, so technically speaking, we talk about 6 sense organs, but it's not quite correct. There's 5 that are physical, and then the mind. The mind, for example, let me give you what that means by the mental sense organ. The mental sense organ is the thing, okay, so when you are, let's say, dreaming, there's a dream. Dreams are mental events. But then there's something perceiving it, too. That's the mental sense organ. Then there's the consciousness that goes, is experiencing the dream. Do you get that? There's always these 3. Let's take a simple one. Red cup. Okay? Red cup is the object. Your eye is the organ. And then there's something called the EYE, eye consciousness. There's an eye consciousness, there's an ear consciousness, there's a nose consciousness, there's 6 consciousnesses. 6 meaning 5 for the physical senses, and then the 1 for the mental sense. You still need those 3, right? So for me to experience my dreams at night, how about an easier one? You lie back and start daydreaming of your favorite surf spot. Okay? That's a mental event, isn't it? So you're dreaming, if you're a surfer, and you've seen the surf spot, right? And you're thinking about, you're reflecting on when you surfed there last, you see the waves, and say, if I'd done this, done that, I could have, I should have done. So you're having a mental experience, right? That is, so there's what we call the mental sense consciousness, is there's something perceiving that mental event. And then there's the consciousness that is the actual experiencer of that. Does that make sense? Don't worry too much about this one. Just, you can even say there's just the consciousness and there's the mental image. But there's something else happening too, like that's perceiving it. I said experience, I mean perceiving. So there's the fantasy, which is mental, right? You understand that? Mm-hmm. You're seeing your old room when you were a kid. That's an image, right? Then there's something perceiving that. There's a function's perceiving it. And then there's someone experiencing it. So the mental consciousness is the experiencer. The mental sense is the perceiver. And the perceivers are all neutral. The eye can't say, I'm seeing Tish there. You can't say that, right? I see black there. The eye can't say that. Who says it? Consciousness says that. Okay? In the same way you could say, I'm thinking about my child at home. I see it. Okay? Is that your question?
My question was just basically the sense organ. When you have to have all 3, you have the object, the imprint, and then the sense organ. I was thinking one of the 5. But
one of the 5, and then there's a 6.
Okay, so it could be...
For mental events only. For the 6th one, the mental sense.
So like when you're talking about dreaming.
Exactly. Pure mental events.
Okay. And then the thing you're talking about, superstition explodes.
I just wanted to use that picture.
So you're just saying things will...
They just take off. For example, with James's chocolate thing, his mind starts thinking of, once... In that case, it's a mental event. Because it's on his fridge. He keeps it on the top of his refrigerator. And he's in the living room. Right? And a mental image of the chocolate comes up. And he can't let go of that. And pretty soon, even though he promised he would never eat chocolate again, in fact, that chocolate's actually for his friend. It's not even his. That's when it's talking about. And pretty soon that chocolate's gone. And it's like, sorry, I'll get you a new one. You see how that meant superstition means? Superstition means, earlier what we were talking about is we superimpose on, that chocolate, by the way, is nothing but moving atoms. Molecules, atoms. There's no, this we're going to get to next week in more detail. There's nothing really there. It doesn't exist the way it appears. How it appears to him is kind of like this blissful, beautiful, most precious, like golem with a ring, right? It doesn't exist that way.
Right.
But and then the longer he waits, the more his hallucination grows.
The reason I was just asking about superstition, it seems like many of us are superstitious.
He is superstitious. It is superstition. He believes that chocolate will make him happy. It'll never do that. Might give a sense of pleasure for a split few seconds. So it is superstition. Definitely. We have lots of superstitions. That's one of them. We have several main ones. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, yes.
So, about the consciousness, mental,
Yeah.
all that. So when when a person is meditating,
Yes.
and you're focusing on the breath, and then
Mhm.
thoughts are rambling around, and there's something that
Perceiving it.
perceives the thoughts rambling
Yes.
around and returns to the breath. And
Right.
So what is that?
What is that?
Is that the? Can you
Well,
kind of explain?
Yeah.
in this?
I can explain really quickly because otherwise it's going to be 2 or 3 classes long. Meaning, so when we talk about consciousness, so you're meditating and you're focusing on the breath. Then of course that is probably tactile sense because the sensation maybe of the breath. You're not seeing it, right? And then an image of your, you thought about buying a birthday present for your friend because you forgot comes in. And that's a distraction, right? So at that point it changes to the mental sense is pursued because that's a mental event. That's a thought. The birthday present, right? So the distraction's a thought. So you've moved from tactile. Okay, it's still mind is in the back. Mind is the experiencer, but mind has many factors to it.
Right.
This is what's so when I explained it about consciousness, object, and organ. Well, that consciousness, I don't mean it that way, but it has a lot more detail to it. Lots, and that's what you're asking. So one detail I'll tell you is the consciousness is divided into 6 kinds of consciousnesses. But that's you don't have to write it down. They're just related with the organs. But the other thing is, people will say, well, how can the consciousness do that, and how can I see? Because the consciousness has many factors to it. For some factors, it can't perceive itself, can it? A mirror can't see itself, right? But part of the mirror could look back and see the other part of the mirror, can't it? In theory. That's the way the mind is. The mind is not just like a mirror. It has many qualities to it and many functions to it. Okay? So one function is analytical. It has an analytical function. We can go into it someday. The 51 mental factors.
No, I study all this stuff, and
Well,
suddenly
if you
it's
study,
like,
it's okay.
Oh, that's what it's
No,
about.
yeah. So, have you ever heard of the 51 mental factors?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's that. Look at that again, and that helps you understand what's happening when you're just watching the breath. Watching the breath seemed pretty simple, didn't it? So I'm not sure I answered your question, but I got to go into too much detail, I think. So what was the actual confusion that you were asking about?
No, I was just when you were talking about
The 3?
object.
Yeah.
I was like, well, how does that work in meditation?
Right.
Just to help me, like.
Right. Well, I'll give you one last little confusing thing.
Oh.
You ready? In the 51 mental factors, there's 5 of them are always present. Have you heard that before? Omnipresent. 5 omnipresent. So when we are when our mind is working 24 hours a day, even when we're dying, even when we die, there's 5 that are always functioning. Okay? There's 5 functions of the mind that are always operating. One of them is called attention, for example. Okay? That might help you to know, what's going on when I'm watching my breath. 5 mental, they're all going to be functioning when you're watching your breath. One being attention, for example. Okay? Just leave it at that. Is that okay? Okay. You can look up those 5, and then that might help. Okay. So this is number 2. I'm going to try and finish the 6, and then we'll do a little sitting. Okay. Bad friends, number 3. You got bad friends that bring you chocolate.
Oh, it's just a start. A whole bunch of other stuff.
Okay. An insincere and this is just a quote. An insincere and evil friend is more to be feared than a wild beast. A wild beast may wound your body, but an evil friend will wound your mind.
So true.
Yeah, no, this is really true because let's say take a gross example. Let's say about the boss even, not in that gross of example. You know what happens? She calls her friend before work. You call your coworker, who also hates the boss, and say, "What about that guy? Did you see what he did yesterday? Right? Can you believe this memo he left me? He told me to, right?" And she's going, "Yeah, he's such a, right?" That helps explode the disturbing emotion more, doesn't it?
It spreads around.
It spreads around, and we always do that. We look for friends. We talk with people who will support our point of view.
That's true.
And our point of view is usually wrong. From the point of view of reality.
Yeah.
From the point of view what's really real and what's really helpful. So what's really helpful changes when you start becoming an inner being. An inner being we talked about the first night. When you start becoming an inner being, you want people around you who help you see reality because that's what dissolves this thing for good. Okay? People who are empathetic to you, they may not be very helpful. Taking the drinking example. If you don't want to drink, first one was, if you don't have the imprint, you won't drink. Okay, you might have the imprint. Then the second one was object. Well, don't go into a bar. Third one, don't hang around with people who drink. That's all this means. But it gets more and more subtle about, you know that expression in Buddhism about the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha? Ever people heard that before? Okay, that's what Sangha means. I mean, that's one definition of Sangha. Be with people who are going to help support your spiritual development, inner development. Okay? That's all this one really is about. Bad friends. I like this. I had to put this picture on. Anybody else? So that's misleading social conditions. It's the same as bad friends. It's the same thing. Who are Breaking Bad fans? Okay. Mr. White, thank you. I wish it would come back. It's not going to come back on. Mr. White was not a very positive teacher. Okay? Social conditions. So it also has to do with people who teach you. Okay? Not just friends, people who just have a strong influence on your life. Remember that, because that has to do with our kids and their teachers and things like that, who they hang around with. Okay, that's a strong influence on our minds, how we develop. Okay. Mr. White. I guess I did a lot of it. I guess I like this one. People who lead to develop the disturbing emotions. This is still number 3 on all the 3. Yeah. One's lifestyle. Another way of looking at it. I had a client some years ago who was very concerned or dedicated to her spiritual development, and this is not a value judgment on this, but she was a stripper. I mean, she would come for therapy, and I was like, yeah, that'd be good and strong. But then she'd go back into this social condition. It was just too intense. It's just really too hard for most people. It's not impossible, right? So that, for example, your job, I don't know what it is, but if it's in an environment where all the other people around you are supporting, any of us, an aggressive approach, a greedy approach, cutthroat approach, a dishonest approach, things like that, and you're kind of trying to figure out, God, how do I do this? And then it's going to, pretty soon not you, but a person succumbs if they don't leave. It's more and more like that. Okay. This also goes. Made me think of this Pygmalion effect. Do you know about that study? Do you know about? Anyone know about? Do you know? Sounds familiar. This was a study done, 70s, I think, and these researchers had a theory about development for kids, and so they went and they divided a group of kids who all tested the same, academically tested the same, same level of academic ability, IQ, all those kinds of things. And they divided the class into two groups. And they told the teachers, one teacher, they said, okay, this group of kids are gifted. They're very fast learners. They're very bright, very motivated. The other teacher, they told, what did they say? The other teacher, these kids are challenged, slow, low performers, right? And the funny thing was that also these kids had been classmates for a couple of years already. So, it wasn't random in that sense. We all know what happened.
How
So,
could they do that?
well, the interesting thing, I give credit to the research. Well, this is back earlier when, morality is a little different. Ethics are a bit different. But I will say, they ended the study way early because they didn't like what was happening. Of course, the test scores were dropping. And they even looked at the amount of time that the teachers were giving eye contact with the lower performing kids versus the higher, all that sort of stuff. Well, that's this kind of thing as well. It just shows the impact. Those kids were just regular kids, but bad teachers. Okay, bad social environment.
Teacher's attitude.
Teachers' attitudes. They were not bad teachers.
But that's what I.
They got,
telling.
yeah,
It's the attitude of the teacher. It's
Yeah.
not their skill.
it's exactly right. Probably they're both equally skilled. I imagine they chose two teachers that were equally skilled. And I probably the same thing would have happened if you switched the teachers, right? It would same. That's the theory. So now, the problem with that is 1 hour can agitate your mind. Isn't that true? When you talk to someone, then all day you feel upset. Maybe a few days, maybe weeks. Yeah.
And I go through that chocolate cake.
Yeah.
Big unending circle.
Yeah. If someone leaves you out of a conversation, hey, why wasn't I there? You guys met? You ever had that experience? Everyone hates feeling left out. Isn't it? It's a funny thing. I shouldn't say everyone. It's a generalization. Generally, people don't like being left out. Then you get the invitations, like, okay, I don't need to go, right? Think about do you know that feeling of when you get left out? It's terrible. Let's go to our childhood or something. And you can't get it. You rationally go, God, well, I guess they did it because they thought I wasn't here today. And then you find out they knew you were there today, but anyway, that's really an agitated mind. It's very painful. The reason I put that at the bottom is just to give an idea. If you're an advanced practitioner, meaning you're an advanced in inner development, you can do any of these things. Your mind doesn't move. Just to point. It doesn't mean you constantly avoid the object, or you avoid these social conditions. You don't. Advanced practitioner actually goes into them. Advanced goes into them rather than avoids them. Okay? Bet you're wondering why. Fourth one, I can't answer everything in one day. Unhelpful explanations. So this has to do with bad teachings, not just bad teachers. Okay? If you kill infidels, you will be reborn in heaven. It's better to kill abortion doctors. It's okay, because you're saving lives. I mean, these things could be true. They don't sound like they're true to me. They don't sound very helpful. Unhelpful explanations. Or like we tell our kids, well, if he's bullying you, tomorrow when you go back, you better beat the crap out of him. You got to stand up for yourself. Maybe that's true. I don't know. I don't know enough about bullying. But, right? It happens all the time. Unhelpful explanations. this is something that came from my teacher. When he was giving this teaching on it, he felt that the worst thing was believing. Well, he didn't like any of these. I guess believing in a teacher as special. This happens a lot. Now, this is about a spiritual teacher, but it could be. There's a lot of New Age things happening. Not even New Age anymore, right? You look at. Pick up the like the Yoga Journal, or what's that? A Tricycle, or I'm trying to think of another one. I get this therapist,
Psychology Today.
Psychology Today. That's a great one. I actually have a subscription to it because I have an ad in their thing, and then I get it, so I have to read it. It's like, oh my God, this is my profession? Jeez. Animal therapy? Are you kidding me? Wolf therapy. There's wolf therapy. I swear to you. Have you seen it? Get this, man. Get psychology, and you can go through it. Wolf therapy. Now, that's not to say that it didn't help somebody on some level. I get that. I'm just generalizing. It's just like
with the wolf. Or do you
it's with the what. You can choose which one. They have 4 of them. Like Rocket and I don't know the names. I can't remember. If I offend anyone, please forgive me. I think we have to draw a line somewhere. But anyway. But we have to be careful and people often ask me, what do you think of so and so? What do you think of so and so? And it's tough for me because sometimes I might be concerned about a particular teacher, and you don't want to criticize because what do I know, right? But if the teacher is not so ethical, then at the same time not to say something is tricky too. So it's not an easy thing. But of course, it's not easy. It's based on judgment. But your judgment is based upon the results and the effect of their teachings will have on your mind. But you have to make a value judgment. But it doesn't mean to go around criticizing teachers. It's not what it's meant. And these can be just regular teachers of your kids. We took my daughter, we had to take her out of a particular classroom because the teacher was not helpful for her and for her.
But when you speak to like your clients who come in, you wouldn't hit them straight with Buddhism.
Oh, no, I never
you would
do.
find out like what their beliefs are, and then with them, and then gradually.
Yeah, I never talk about Buddhism. Well, I shouldn't say. If they want to talk about Buddhism, I talk about it. I never much bring it up.
So
No, 'cause it's
psychology is not a false teaching.
Psychology is universal.
But a pure Buddhist would sit there and go, might say psychology isn't the way to go. You should go with Buddhism only.
Oh, no, a pure Buddhist wouldn't. If you're a pure Buddhist, you'd understand that there's no such thing as Buddhist psychology. It's just psychology. That's what I believe, Anyway, we know the rest. Blind devotion leads to confusion and suffering. Again, I think you know what these mean. It's often linked with craving and attachment. And you need to check on the effects upon the mind. Does it increase superstition and confusion? Does it increase craving for more information? That's another just subtle one. We might really be interested in a particular system of thought, and actually all it is not all. It doesn't mean you don't study other things. It's about becoming attached to them and clinging to them. I study all kinds of things. Some of them I do get attached to, and then later on down the road, whatever. And I find out I went too far, whatever. But you have to check the effects in your mind. So a lot of my friends, would be saying, oh, do you know this? It might be the latest teacher or meditation retreat, like, techniques, mindfulness techniques. You have to check. Are they helpful or not helpful? You have to. We don't just accept. We tend to be pretty naive. Us Americans, maybe. We see all kinds of different kinds of retreats with a teacher or a therapist, and it doesn't mean it's helpful. Okay, so that's 4 of them. I'll just give the last one because I really want to do. We're out of time. Okay. There are 2 more. The last 2 are habit. So if you do it a lot, you'll do it a lot. Okay? Habit is the other thing that raises the disturbing emotions, difficult emotions. If you think about the one that really disturbs you, you trace it back, I bet you're caught into a habitual pattern with it. Doesn't mean you want to do it, but you're stuck in a pattern, which is a habit, and you may not think that it actually contributes to it, but it does. For example, smoking was a good one. I had the habit of smoking, and you know what? The ways I was trying to stop smoking did actually increase my smoking. It didn't decrease it. Because it had a lot of anxiety to it. And I felt, part of why I smoked was maybe I felt bad about myself. And then when you can't quit, you feel bad about yourself. So that's not the right way to quit. So I found out, someone helped me. They just said, well, he didn't say it like that. He said it over about an hour. He said, how many cigarettes do you smoke in a day? I said, about 6. He said, 6 or 7. That's only about 20 minutes a day, right? Something like that. And he said, who are you the other times of the day? You're a non-smoker, right? I said, yeah. He says, well, then just be more of a non-smoker. It made so much sense to me. It's a mindset. And because I'm Buddhist, because I like that mental approach, that really worked for me. I could see. He says it's a smoker mindset that wants to have a cigarette. It's a smoker identity. It was a smoker identity that needs to have a cigarette. And so he says, just be more of the non-smoker identity. And we talked about how to do that, and so it's more long-term. But I thought that really worked. Okay, because a lot of the other things I was doing was just increasing the habit, actually, even though I didn't think I was. Okay? The problem with the habits is every time you do it, the imprint becomes thicker and thicker. That's the problem, okay? We all know that, but anyway, this is just a point about how these arise. Because, you get angry when it goes wrong. So it increases your that disturbing emotion once again. Okay? Like if you know you shouldn't get angry at your boss, then you go, gosh, what am I doing? I know I shouldn't get angry, right? That's a more disturbing emotion, isn't it? I know you don't do that, but, for other people. Do you know what I mean, though?
I get angry.
You get angry. No, you get angry. And what about the chocolate cake? I know I shouldn't have a chocolate. God, what am I doing?
I may have to stop.
Yeah. Go slow. You don't want to, cold turkey. And the last is mistaken conceptualization. This is what we'll talk about next week. I promise you we will talk about the root of all these arises is ignorant, mistaken conceptualizations. I'll also talk to you about interventions that are used for our Buddhist approach, which there's thousands. But what we'll talk about is a few that are kind of, what's the word? We'll just talk about a few different ones.
Yay.
Okay? And talk about what, the theory, why those work, and what the theory, the psychology is behind them. Okay, so I will bring some of those. So mistaken conceptions is just about. That's what we were talking about earlier in this hour or this class. What we do when James sees the chocolate, what he does is he exaggerates its qualities. Not only is he mistaken in how he sees it, he then exaggerates it. Okay, not only are you mistaken in seeing your boss that way, that's a mistake. But then you exaggerate it. Now, the other thing happens is minimizing. So, Lam Yeshe taught this text for 7 years in the wintertime. Over 7 years, called Utanamshe. And the whole thing was about how we exaggerate or minimize.
Wow.
Yeah. So it goes. So this is not a small thing. Yeah. But so think about minimize, exaggerate, okay? Because it's not just we blow things up, we ignore too. That's the minimizing.
Sure do.
Yeah. Okay. Last questions, anything before? Does this make sense? I hope it wasn't too technical or theoretical. I kind of like theory, so I have to always be careful of it. We ran out of time, but if you can do that ABCD method that we did last times? Do you remember? Yeah.
Just a quick question about that, on the E part.
Yeah, the inquiry. We're not really, okay. Yeah.
We're focusing more on permanence and existence as opposed. You said we have.
Oh, I want you to get in touch with that. Yeah.
As opposed to impermanence.
Yes.
Because you got to focus on what we're seeing first.
Right. Becoming familiar. And that you'll find that throughout. Well, throughout sort of the deeper meditations like that one, where it really helps to first see what's the incorrect thing before trying to see the correct thing. Just in a few, mainly around reality, and those kinds, like when we're trying to see how we see things, and how we see things incorrectly. Those particularly, it's very important to first identify what we call the object of negation, is a technical term. So what we're trying to negate here is permanence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to become familiar first with the object of negation. We don't do that with everything, but in the sense of impermanence and reality, we do that. Do it with that.
What was the second one you said? Permanence and permanence and
Existence.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're just running out of time. So if you can do that A, B, C, D, A is anatomy, B is for breath, C is count, 1 through 10, and then 10 through 1, 3 times. D is for noticing the distractions when they arise. The inquiry is then you inquire, you can start by saying, okay, in the class we're talking about everything is impermanent. You can even think about how that's true for a moment or two. Start looking at all the things that are impermanent. And then you say, well, what am I seeing instead? And you can do that as an inquiry until you get an actual insight. Once you get the insight, then you try and hold that. That's why we do the ABCD. Why we develop mindfulness and concentration? It's not just to develop mindfulness and concentration. That's what everyone else is doing. But for us, it's just so we can have the mental training, the mental, what do you get in shape? Discipline. To then focus on this thing, the inquiry. The real, it's a balance between the inquiry and the ABCD. But not, most of what's been taught out there about mindfulness is related somehow with ABCD. It just has to do with developing focus, right? And in science, not even focus as much as just bare awareness. But for us, we feel that doesn't really do that much. It calms your mind, and it's good in that sense. But it doesn't lead to the elimination of the disturbing emotions. The only thing that will lead to elimination of disturbing emotions is understanding reality. So in that sense, actually making tangible. Let's say, again, problem with smoking. Let's say the smoking, that's my disturbing thing that I'm working on. Just doing the breath mindfulness meditation won't get rid of that, actually, even though it feels like it gets rid of it. And it might get rid of it for a long time. But what actually gets rid of it is I have to do the other thing about the inquiry and how I'm seeing the whole thing incorrectly. I'm seeing cigarettes wrong. I'm seeing what I think as pleasure is wrong. That's what will cut and get rid of the problem. I'm seeing it as permanent, for example. That chocolate is permanent, isn't it?
Well, sort of.
When it shows up in the mind, it appears as permanent. What?
Where it goes.
Where it goes is permanent. Okay.
It can be recreated.
What?
Ongoing.
What's that?
It can be recreated.
Yeah, and is the pleasure in the chocolate or in your mind?
Pleasure's in the mind.
Okay. So, why do you go buy the chocolate? Why don't you just
Because
generate in the mind?
it's a powerful object.
It is about. They can make a lot of money off of that, don't they?
Yes, it's a powerful object.
Lama Yeshe used to say that advertisers were the greatest psychologists. They really understood the human mind. Okay, so good night, and we'll see you next week. Thank you. Okay. Thanks.